Ready to shake up your game with a bold and thrilling new gambit? Stay tuned. By the end of this video, you'll have a powerful weapon to take your opponents by surprise. Let's dive straight into the action. We begin with the move pawn to e4, and black responds with pawn to e5, a classic and well-known setup called the king's pawn opening. But here comes the first twist. We immediately play pawn to d4. This position is known as the center game, and you can probably see why. With 3 pawns occupying the center squares, it's all about early central control. Now, in most cases, black will capture the pawn on d4, and if they don't, that's usually not great for them. Why? Because we can then capture their center pawn and leave them without central control. Assuming they do take the pawn, here's where our surprise begins. Instead of the usual moves, we play pawn to f4. Now, this is not the mainstream continuation in the center game. Most players opt for solid developing moves like knight to f3 or bishop to c4. But what I'm about to show you is a lesser-known line, one with a much higher win rate in practice. After we push pawn to f4, black will often play knight to c6, aiming to support their extra pawn on d4. That's logical. They're a pawn up and want to defend it. Next, we develop with knight to f3, targeting that central pawn. Black will usually bring out bishop to c5, reinforcing the pawn once again. At this point, it's clear we're probably not going to win that pawn back easily. It's defended well by both the bishop and the knight, and we don't have an immediate or strong way to pressure it further. But don't worry, this setup leads to a dynamic and aggressive game where we're just getting started. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to stop worrying about that central pawn for now and simply continue developing. We play bishop to d3. There's a very specific reason why we place the bishop here, and you'll see why in just a few moves. Typically, black continues their development with something like knight to f6, a very standard and common move in this position. Now, it's time for us to castle kingside, and in the vast majority of games, black will do the same. They'll also castle kingside. But here's the twist. This kingside castling from black is actually a mistake. Why? Because now we play pawn to a5, and here's where the placement of our bishop on d3 pays off. The bishop is now directly eyeing h7, setting up a powerful tactical shot. What often happens next is black brings their knight into the center with knight to d5, thinking it's a strong move. But now we strike with a classic tactic known as the Greek gift. We play bishop takes h7, delivering check. At this point, black doesn't have many good choices. If they move the king to h8 or capture the bishop with king takes h7, our follow-up is the same. We jump in with knight to g5, giving a check. And now, black's position begins to crumble. They have very limited defensive options, and the attack is just getting started. Now, after your knight jumps to g5 with check, black has 2 options. They can either capture the knight or move the king. If they capture your knight with the queen, you simply recapture with your pawn, and you're completely winning. You're up significant material, and your position remains dominant. But let's say they try to move the king instead. The only safe square that avoids immediate checkmate is g8. However, if they make the mistake of trying to run out with king to g6, you've got a strong reply. Play pawn to f5, delivering check. Notice how your bishop is still guarding your knight on g5, which means the king can't escape. The only square left for black's king is h6. Once again, your bishop is controlling key escape squares, so you now calmly play queen to g4. This sets up the very simple and deadly threat of queen to h4, delivering checkmate, and there's almost nothing black can do to stop it. They're completely stuck, and you're about to end the game. Now go back to the earlier position. If black had gone directly to king to h6 instead, you shift plans slightly and bring your queen to d3. That's threatening queen to h7, which would be checkmate in one move. There's no good defense. Most players at this point will panic and simply capture the knight on g5, trying to survive. And again, if you get your opponent to give up their queen just to stop your attack, you've already won in principle. Sometimes they might even try to block your queen's path with pawn to g6, but here's the beauty of the position. You swing your queen to h3, give a check, and after the king moves, it's all over. Queen to h7 is checkmate. Now, if black plays the best defensive move, king to g8, the beauty of the Greek gift idea is that you continue with queen to h5, threatening checkmate in 1 on h7. The objectively best defense here, though rarely played, is for black to give up their queen by capturing your knight with queen takes g5. If they do that, you're thrilled. You've traded a knight for a queen and are clearly winning. But realistically, most players won't sacrifice their queen. Instead, they might try rook to e8, preparing to run with the king if needed. It's a decent idea. If you go straight for queen to h7, the king can escape, and there's no forced mate. However, here's a crucial tactical idea to remember. Since the rook moved, the pawn on f7 is now undefended. So instead of queen to h7, you strike with queen takes f7, forcing king to h8. From there, the rest is a forced dance. Queen to h5 check, forcing king to g8, queen to h7 check, forcing king to f8, queen to h8 check, forcing king to e7, and finally queen to g7, checkmate. Because the f7 pawn was taken earlier, there's no longer anything blocking the final blow. And just like that, within 15 moves, you've scored a win using a rarely seen, but brutally effective, gambit from the center game. Let's rewind a bit to an important alternative line. After knight to c6 and knight to f3, most players go for the main line with bishop to c5, but not everyone follows that path. Some try to get clever and play bishop to b4, giving a check. Here, you need to be careful not to misstep, but there's a simple and solid reply. Just block the check with pawn to c3. Black will almost always capture the pawn, which actually works in your favor. It opens up the c3 square for your knight. Now, taking it further, many players will go ahead and trade their bishop for your knight on c3. Why? Because if they don't, that knight often jumps into the center later, especially after you've castled, and becomes a dominant piece, so they try to eliminate it early while they can. After they capture your pawn on c3 and you recapture, you're left with an isolated a-pawn, which isn't ideal, but it's harmless here since it's not under attack. Now most players will play pawn to d6 to stop you from pushing e5, but if they skip that and play knight to f6 right away, go ahead and push e5, followed by bishop to d3, and get your aggressive setup rolling. Assuming they play d6, that's fine. You continue with bishop to d3, they play knight to f6, and then you castle kingside. Now here's the key moment. If they also castle, the position becomes familiar. You push a 5, they capture, you recapture, they drop their knight to d5, and here it is again, the Greek gift tactic. You sacrifice your bishop on h7 with check, they capture, and you follow with knight to g5. The same lethal idea plays out. Either they give up their queen or try to run, but the attack is crushing. To avoid this, instead of castling on move 9, a better idea for black is to play bishop to g4, applying pressure and disrupting your plans. But many don't, and that mistake leads straight into your trap. At this point, since your knight is pinned, you need to proceed carefully, but there's a strong move. Pawn to a5. This follows the familiar theme from earlier lines. Your bishop is on d3, and you're looking to break the center open with e5. Once you push e5, black will usually capture, and you recapture. From here, they typically either bring their knight to d5 or get greedy and capture the extra pawn. If they go knight to d5, you respond with bishop to c4, applying pressure. Now you have two attackers on that knight, and if black plays a natural move like knight to b6, it opens up a powerful tactic. You play bishop takes f7 check. If black declines to take back, you're simply up a pawn. But if they do capture with the king, then comes knight to g5, unleashing a discovered double check from your rook and knight. Since it's a double check, the king must move. If it retreats to e8, you win the bishop on b4 and enjoy a fantastic position. But if it goes to g8, a brilliant follow-up appears. Rook to f8 check. Now, if black captures the rook with their queen, you hit with queen to b3 check, and there's no escape. You're heading straight for checkmate. If the king captures the rook instead, you respond with queen to f1 check. Their only real defense is to give up the queen with queen to f6, or else get checkmated by queen to f7. Either path leads to a winning attack. It's a beautiful tactical idea that often catches opponents off guard and ends the game quickly in your favor.